was born at the perfect time, just after the Depression and right before the war. I don't have to explain the war to most of the older folks because they know there was only one war, the big one, WW2. That's the one where, Franklin was going to get us out of it and take care of things. FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt created a program after the Great Depression to try to get people back to work. One of them was the CCC program, one was the WPA. A lot of you recognize the WPA, but the CCC had a great program that was used for civilians to work. And my daddy, we lived up in the foothills of the Appalachians in the Tennessee Valley of North Alabama, and he got a job working with the CCC program one summer, spent an entire summer building outhouses all over Lawrence County, Alabama. I mean, by the end of that summer, folks, I just took for granted that every house in the world had an outhouse behind it.
Well, there are a lot of things we take for granted, Wayne.
Yeah.
One of them is when we flip the switch on the wall, the lights come on. We got electricity. Another one down here in Florida is every hot, humid summer afternoon along about 4 o'clock, we can look forward to having a thunderboomer with lightning.
Yeah. Well, back around the turn of the century, and I don't mean this century, I mean the last century, old Darnell Manussi knew just about everything there was in the world to know about thunderstorms. Those thunderstorms that rolled up, but he didn't know hardly anything at all about that newfangled thing called electricity. In fact, the only thing he knew about electricity, he learned one day when he was in town. And he was talking to one of the fellows, that young fellow dressed in an expensive suit down at the store, who told him all about electricity. And that's when old Darnell decided he needed to have some of that electric out on his farm.
Well, there are a couple of things I ought to tell you about Darnell. First of all, he kept a bunch of goats on the farm, and he used them to keep the grass down around the buildings. Well, not only did they keep the grass short where he wanted it kept short, they would wander all over the place and eat everything in sight that he didn't want them to eat, including Ms. Manussi's prize flowers. So it didn't take old Darnell long to make up his mind that he was going to get one of those newfangled electric fences to control the goats.
Now you see, the young fellow at the store explained to old Darnell how he could have an electric fence out on his farm. Didn't try to explain to Darnell that he didn't have electricity at the farm, but he could put some of those electric batteries out there, and he could build him a portable fence. He could move anywhere he wanted to. Why, no time at all, he'd have them goats eating the grass in his yard where he wanted them to eat it, not where they wanted to eat it.
Well, when Darnell told the missus about his plans, she allowed us how she just plain didn't want any of that electric fence business on the place. It was totally unpredictable. It was nothing more than a bunch of foolishness. And besides that, she had lived too long without it, and she had absolutely no intention of changing her ways at this late date.
But still, old Darnell, he liked the idea of having that fence out there to control the roaming around of the goats, so that relocatable fence could do it for him. Besides that, he'd talk to that young fellow at the store in town, and he'd ask him about the fact about batteries getting blown up. The batteries, fellow said, Darnell said, I figure you got about as much chance of having those batteries hit by lightning as you have of your horse kicking you in the head. Now, old Darnell never had been kicked in the head by his horse, so he figured them was pretty good odds.
Well, it wasn't long before the missus paid a visit to the two-holer in question. That's when she saw that strange-looking contraption over in the corner, right underneath the Sears Roebuck catalog. She didn't like what she saw at all. I may need to explain to you about that Sears Roebuck catalog. Why, it was the mainstay in every home for purposes both utilitarian as well as entertaining. Well, what other publication in the ordinary home could offer pictures and poetry, promises of a better life, all while making a significant contribution to the perpetuation of personal hygiene? Well, as I was saying, Ms. Manussi saw that contraption in the corner, and she didn't like it one bit. But she didn't say anything. She just kept her mouth shut in a thin, tight line.
It was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Darnell was down in the garden. He was hoeing between tomato plants down there, getting the grass out of them. He looked up, and there's this big, ominous-looking black cloud coming up out of the southwest. You know how it is in the Southland in the summertime. I mean, it's throwing hail balls, spitting fire like lightning bolts out of there. Hail balls are falling, rain pouring down, thunder rumbling, lightning hitting everywhere. Got old Darnell to thinking. So next morning, first thing he did was get in the wagon and go back into town again to see that young fella with the expensive suit at the store there in town, and he asked him, said, "Young fella, I got a question for you this morning." He said, what do you think the odds are that lightning might hit that fence post and fence line I put out there in my place while the missus is a-sitting and a-meditating? And I'm here to tell you right now that he thought about it, and he said, "Darnell, I'd say chances are pretty high." And I went home feeling a whole heap better when he said, "I'd say the chances of lightning hitting that fence line's about 1 in 10,000.
Well, there must have been 9,999 already that afternoon. Because just as Ms. Manucci took herself out to that two-holer, got herself settled in, the lightning began to play back and forth in the western sky. Somewhere outside that outhouse, over just south of the chicken coop, one of those lightning bolts hit that brand new electric fence. You know, the brand new electric fence designed to put Darnell Manucci out there on the cutting edge electric technology.
No, Darnell didn't know exactly what it was that went on down there in the outhouse that afternoon, but it must have been mighty dadgummed exciting. One whole end of the roof of the building blown clear off. Roof split right down the middle. And all the wood around that little hole where those wires went in to tie onto the electric battery burned clean away.
Ms. Manucci came stumbling out of the outhouse. She was singed, rubber-legged, looking a little crazed. Darnell ran over to her. He got her to lying down. And to his credit, he stayed right with her until he was reassured she was going to be all right.
And folks, we all know how it is with thunderstorms here in the Southland during the summertime. Wasn't hardly any time at all, just a few minutes until that thunderstorm had done gone away, and everything began to look good. Darnell looked over, and the missus was feeling better, and he went out to survey the damage. And the first thing he did was wind up by getting all them goats together and putting them back in the pen down in there behind the barn where they used to be. Then he rolled up every bit of that shiny wire, and he hung it on a peg out there in the tool shed.
He took all those skinny-looking, funny-looking posts down to the garden to use for tomato stakes, and the beautiful glass battery casings. He hauled them into the chicken house to hold the nests for the laying hens.
I said a minute ago, well, Darnell didn't know exactly what it was that went on down there in the outhouse that afternoon. And he was sure glad the missus was too shook up to remember. But one thing old Darnell Manucci knew. He knew he was through fooling around out there on the cutting edge of electric technology.
Hey dog, quit barking at me. Hey dog, quit barking at me. You'll never see this face again. My work's through, my money's spent. So hey dog, quit barking at me.